I'm not on the list. I laughed, a bit flustered, looking over my shoulder as if she were talking to someone else. Sarah wants the trip to be peaceful. No stress, no hassle. We thought you'd be okay staying behind. At that moment, I wasn't sure if I was still breathing. I just stood there, still holding the bag of snacks I'd brought for everyone on the plane. Inside, I heard Sarah burst out laughing at something Mark said. The sound of suitcases being dragged, passports neatly placed on the shelf. A lively vacation atmosphere that I thought I was a part of. I'm Emily, 29 years old, a freelance graphic designer in San Diego. Not rich, not remarkable, but I was fine. At least I thought I was until the moment my mom spoke to me as if I were an uninvited guest. I used to think my family just had communication issues. Turns out they were great at communicating, just not with me. My sister Sarah is 3 years older than me. Since we were kids, she's been the light in our parents' eyes, always punctual, always high-achieving, always knowing how to be charming at the right moment. I, on the other hand, was the unpredictable one. The kid who asked why, who chose purple when everyone else picked pink. I used to think those differences made me unique. But growing up, I realized in my family being different meant being difficult. I didn't stay long enough to ask my mom again. I just took a step back gently, as if afraid of dropping something inside me. The faint scent of her perfume lingered as she closed the door. I still remember that final click, small but distinct, like a period at the end of my place in their family picture. I walked down the steps, opened the car door. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just drove. In the rearview mirror, the little blue house faded away, and I, like a lost child, had only one question looping in my head. Since when was I no longer considered part of the family? On the way back, I stopped at Mission Beach to calm down. I sat in the car watching the waves. My phone buzzed at 10:47 p.m. A Venmo request from my mom, $500 your share for the plane tickets and villa. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because how could they excluded me from the trip, yet still billed me as if I were a shadow, a pre-programmed expense. I didn't respond, but I knew what I'd do. I sent back $1 with a note. There'll be a surprise. It didn't start this time. Growing up, I always felt like I had to earn a place in every plan. When the family went to Disneyland, I was the one sleeping at the foot of the bed. In family photos, I was often placed at the far right, where if someone got cropped out of a narrow frame, it would be me. My parents weren't cruel. They just chose the more convenient daughter. Sarah, with her just right smile, measured words, and life that never strayed from the middle path, was the pride they could easily swallow. I, with my independent decisions, unstable job, and daring to skip my aunt's birthday party, for personal reasons, was the piece they didn't know where to place. But I had thought I was invited to Hawaii. Since spring, we'd talked about it in texts, calls, holiday dinners. Everything was vague, true. We'll share details later. Still finalizing tickets. I found it slightly odd, but thought they were just disorganized. I never imagined they were deliberately planning a vacation that excluded me. I got back to my downtown San Diego apartment past midnight. Opened the door, turned on the soft yellow light, everything quiet and tidy. Tomorrow morning I was supposed to head to the airport with them. Supposed to be part of the airport photo with a slightly awkward smile, but still wanting to belong. Instead, I opened my laptop. Searched for flights to Hawaii. Same day, same time. Seats were still available. I booked a ticket, but not to their hotel. I found a private villa, luxurious quiet with a private pool and a beach just steps away. All booked under the name Miller Family. My family name, no mistake about it. I didn't want revenge. I'm not the type to revel in others' discomfort. But I'm also not the type to quietly wait for others to decide where I belong. I'd been silent for too long. I'd given up my place too many times. This time I'd be at the center on my terms. I checked the ticket again, printed the booking confirmation, then quietly closed my laptop. In the stillness of the night, I no longer felt sad or angry. I felt ready, and I knew this wasn't just a vacation. This was a redefinition of my place not in the trip, but in the family that always said I was different. I lay down, pulled the blanket up to my chest, and stared at the ceiling for a while. Tomorrow they'd fly to Hawaii, and they didn't know. I'd be there too. I boarded the plane with the last wave of passengers pulling my familiar small gray suitcase. Headphones on hoodie up, I looked like any other vacation-bound traveler, nothing remarkable, no one noticing. That was the point. I sat in the middle seat in row 23, between two strangers glued to their phones. No one recognized me, especially not the three people I knew were up near the front of the plane, a few rows away, my mom, Sarah, and Mark. I'd seen them at the gate bickering with the staff about window seats. Sarah wore a white jumpsuit with a bow at the neck. My mom kept checking her watch every few minutes, irritated. Mark fumbled with his travel documents as always, despite everything being on an app now. No one suspected I was on the same flight, and I wanted to keep it that way. I wasn't here for a scene. I didn't want a confrontation at the airport, no tug-of-war or interrogation. I didn't need them to understand. I just needed them to feel what it's like to be left out quietly, but clearly the way I felt, standing at their door that night. The plane shuddered slightly and took off. I leaned back, closed my eyes. My breathing steadied. I was going to the same place as them, but my journey was entirely different. The next morning, I was one of the first passengers to step out of the terminal at Honolulu Airport. A man in a white shirt stood at the exit holding a sign, Miller Family. I walked straight to him, nodded lightly. He didn't ask questions, just took my suitcase and opened the door to a sleek black SUV. Inside, there were cold towels and a basket of tropical fruit. We drove along the coast. The early morning sea breeze was still cool, the smell of salt and gentle sunlight not yet harsh. A fleeting moment of calm before the crowds flooded the beaches. I glanced at the row of large resorts where my family would be staying, where they thought a luxurious oceanfront room was waiting, booked under their name. But I'd booked it first. The villa I chose was in a secluded resort area. No tour groups, no children's noise. An oceanfront villa private pool, 2 bedrooms, a balcony opening to palm trees casting shadows on the sand. I walked in, and the staff greeted me with a smile and "Aloha, Ms. Miller. Everything is ready for you and your family." And I nodded. "They'll come later." I didn't know then that my mom was standing in the lobby of the big resort, suitcase in tow, passport in hand, trying to understand why the booking under Miller had already been checked in that morning. I didn't know how Sarah reacted when told the oceanfront villa has been claimed. The name was flagged as VIP early this morning. I didn't need to know. Not then. I was lying on a lounge chair by the pool holding a cold coconut drink. The breeze was gentle, the air scented with plumeria, and for the first time I didn't feel like I was squeezing into a seat not meant for me. That afternoon I met Cassie and Joy at a beachfront restaurant buffet breakfast, but with outdoor tables facing the ocean. They were at the next table laughing loudly because a mimosa had spilled. I chuckled instinctively. Cassie, light brown hair, bright eyes, non-stop jokes. Joy, calmer a listener, but occasionally dropping a brutally accurate comment that made everyone pause in shock. They were from Seattle. Their friend's bachelorette party got canceled because the bride got pregnant unexpectedly, so they decided to go anyway, just celebrating themselves now. "And you?" Cassie asked, stirring her coffee. I hesitated, then smiled. "I'm here to remind myself I deserve to rest, without needing anyone's permission." Joy nodded. "Sounds like a birthday card someone should write." We had lunch together, talked about work movies, undefined relationships. No one asked about my family. No one judged. I felt light. It was the first time in years I had a conversation where I didn't need to edit myself to fit someone else's expectations. Meanwhile, I guessed my family was scrambling. The first text came from my mom at 3 p.m. "Emily, did you book a room here?" I didn't reply. An hour later, Sarah texted, "Something weird with the villa. Do you know anything?" I stayed silent. The questions didn't matter anymore, because it had happened. They were staying in a smaller room far from the ocean. No pool, no VIP flag on their name. I didn't want them to suffer. But I wanted them to understand gently, clearly, what it feels like to be excluded from something you thought you deserved to be part of. That evening I dined alone. Lanterns lined the path to the restaurant, glowing in the sea breeze. My table was by the railing with sand and gentle waves below. I ordered a margarita grilled fish with mango butter sauce, a fruit salad. Not because they were my favorites, but because for the first time I could order anything without sharing or hearing someone say, "Why so expensive?" I sent myself a text, a sort of diary entry. This isn't revenge. This is redefinition. That's when I realized these days weren't just impulsive reaction. They were a chance to live outside the role I'd played in my family. The one who gets along, lets things go, tones down her personality. I didn't want to be anyone's backdrop anymore. Before bed, I stood on the balcony. Below, the waves murmured. Above, thousands of stars shone unobscured by city lights. I remembered something Sarah said at a family dinner 2 years ago. "You always make things so heavy. This trip, let's hope there's no drama." I stayed silent then. This time I didn't speak up, not because I gave in, but because I'd learned to choose where I want to be present. Tomorrow morning I had plans to go snorkeling with Cassie and Joy. They booked a private small group tour, led by a retired marine biologist. I didn't know what the deep sea held, but I knew I'd dive in with more steadiness than ever. My family, I heard they were still trying to switch rooms. That morning, the sea was an absurd shade of blue. Not the edited phone wallpaper blue, but a real, soft, deep blue, as if the ocean had filtered out all impurities just for today. I was floating on the surface, wearing a mask, hearing my steady breathing through the snorkel and my heart beating slowly. The sun was just warm enough to make the waves sparkle. Underwater fish swam in schools. Some were as small as coins, others long and silver, gliding past my shoulder like a breeze. I didn't scream or wave for anyone to see. I didn't need to prove I was enjoying this. I just lived in it as myself. No role, no backdrop, no explanation. When I climbed back onto the boat, hair dripping with saltwater skin slightly burned from the sun, Cassie handed me a coconut with a straw, grinning brightly. Joy was sprawled out sunbathing, listening to instrumental music. Emily Cassie said you have this quiet way of being present. Like, you don't need to shout for everyone to see you're alive. I paused, then smiled. I'm not sure anyone had ever said that to me before. We spent the afternoon in the town near the resort visiting an old bookstore, a local art shop, eating ice cream under a tree by a small church. I'd never imagined I'd experience Hawaii like this. No rigid schedule, no hourly social media posts, no need for someone to validate. This is a worthwhile vacation. Or rather, I'd never been allowed to enjoy something like this. In every trip before I played a role. The daughter who doesn't complain. The sister who yields. The tag-along. The sensible one. When the family went somewhere, decisions were already made. Which room, who shared what to eat, where to take photos. I was the one carrying extra bags, walking last, watching everyone's stuff while they snorkeled. But this time no one assigned me a role, and I didn't need one. I chose restaurants because I liked them, picked a cafe because it was quiet, went for a walk because I wanted to. No one asked, "Are you sure?" or "Why not pick something easier?" With every step I felt lighter, like peeling off layers of old expectations. Not to rebel, just to return to who I am. That evening back at the villa, I found an envelope slipped under the door. No sender's name, just 3 words in blue ballpoint ink in the corner, Sarah. I sat on the porch, soft light illuminating the wooden floor, and opened it. My sister's handwriting was as neat as ever. Slightly slanted, a bit rigid like the way she lives. Petty. You're embarrassing the family. You think this is clever. It just proves what everyone always thought, selfish attention-seeking, careless about others' feelings. Enjoy your villa. I folded the letter, placed it under my cocktail glass like a coaster. I didn't feel angry or sad. Just tired. Because I was so used to this tone. Not just Sarah's. It was the family's tone, disappointment dressed up as righteousness. For years, they'd said things like this every time I chose something they didn't like. When I refused to study law, so selfish, not thinking of your parents. When I dyed my hair chestnut, just seeking attention. When I didn't come home for Christmas one year because I was mentally breaking down, another excuse to avoid us. Every time I chose myself, they called it betrayal. I don't clearly remember the first time I felt like a thorn in my family's side, but I recall a morning in 6th grade wearing a deep purple t-shirt, my favorite with a moon and cat design. Sarah turned to me in the car and whispered, "Take that shirt off. You look like a freak." My mom didn't object. She just said, "Let her wear what she likes." But in her voice there was something like an apology on my behalf for not being normal like her eldest daughter. After that, I started hiding what I liked. My drawings, my anonymous blog posts, my dream of studying design until I couldn't hide anymore. Sarah was the perfect daughter. I was the hard-to-understand one. It didn't need to be said. It hung in the air at every family gathering, every meal, every argument that ended with me falling silent. But here in Hawaii, I didn't need to be silent anymore. Or argue back. I just stopped playing the role they'd assigned me. The next morning, meditating by the sea, I saw them, my mom, Sarah, and Mark, walking along the shore a few hundred meters away. They looked tired. Sarah was gesturing, clearly annoyed. My mom wore her wide-brimmed hat from every vacation, but this time it didn't look elegant, just tense. They didn't see me. Or maybe they did, but had learned to ignore me as I'd been ignored for years. I didn't hide. I sat still, listened to the breeze. The morning chill made me strangely alert. No anger, just the pure peace of not needing to prove anything anymore. That evening, Cassie and Joy came to the villa. We ate dinner on the balcony under lanterns and soft music. Cassie told a story about an ex-boyfriend nearly burning their tent while camping. Joy shared how she quit her finance job to study coffee making in Italy. "We all thought we had to live the way someone else planned," Joy said, sipping wine. "Until we got too tired and asked, does living like that ever get us where we really want to be?" I looked at them, strangers I'd known for just a few days who made me feel more at ease than my own family. None of us were perfect. But we didn't demand perfection from each other. And that's why I felt real. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "True freedom isn't being allowed. It's daring to move without asking permission." I closed my eyes, listening to the steady waves outside. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I didn't know if they'd text again. But I knew one thing: I'd started living as myself without needing their approval. The next morning, sipping coffee on the balcony, I saw a familiar figure on the rocks by the beach. Mark, alone. No Sarah, no Mom. I wondered, what was he doing there? When I first saw Mark that day, he was sitting alone on the rocks back to the sea, holding a beer. The light from a distant resort cast a faint golden glow on the sand, while the sea was pitch black, only the rhythmic waves audible. No Sarah. No Mom. Just him, the one who always stayed quiet on the sidelines during family issues. I almost turned away. Not because I disliked Mark. In fact, he was probably the one I felt most comfortable with in the family. But I feared the silence between two people bound only by obligation, not close enough to be frank, not distant enough to pretend we didn't see each other. I hesitated for a few seconds, then approached. The sound of my flip-flops on the sand announced my presence. Mark didn't turn. He just raised his beer a lazy wave. I sat down far enough that if he didn't want to talk, he could pretend I wasn't there. But I knew Mark wasn't the type to ignore someone sitting next to him. "I like this place," I said softly, just loud enough for us. "Quiet." Mark nodded slightly, not looking at me. "What's everyone thinking?" I asked, unsure if I was curious, or just hoping anyone would tell me something resembling the truth. Mark sighed, a long, heavy sigh. Then he spoke. "You were never supposed to come." My whole body went cold, despite the warm sea breeze. I didn't respond right away. My heart didn't race or clench. It just emptied. Like a room drained of air. Sarah said, "If you came, the trip wouldn't be peaceful." Your mom agreed. Your dad didn't object. He paused. I thought he was waiting for my reaction, anger tears, or a smirk. But I just stared at the sea. In my eyes, the rippling waves seemed to whisper that deep down I'd known this all along. "And you?" I asked, not turning. Mark touched the beer to his lips, took a sip before answering. I didn't say anything. Didn't object, didn't agree. He paused. I know that was cowardly. I gave a small laugh. Not mocking. The kind of laugh when you finally get an answer to a years-long question, and then feel too exhausted to be angry. "Did you ever think," I said slowly, "that I also wanted peace?" Mark looked at me for the first time in the conversation. His eyes didn't dodge, but they held something like regret mixed with helplessness. "Sarah didn't think so. Your mom thought it was best to go along with her. Your dad, as usual, stayed silent." I nodded. Everything fell into place like the final pieces of a puzzle I'd suspected, but never been allowed to confirm. They didn't forget me. It wasn't an oversight. They deliberately left me out to make things easier, smoother, less risky. In the family script, I was the unstable factor, the variable to be eliminated. "You're not wrong," Mark said quietly. "I know that. I think everyone knows, but no one dares say it." My lips felt dry. The sea breeze no longer felt gentle. It turned cold, as if the night was tightening around me. "The worst part," I said, "isn't being left behind. It's realizing I was never chosen." Mark didn't respond. He just looked out as if he too was wondering how many times he'd stayed silent to keep the so-called peace. I stood up. "Thanks," I said. Mark looked up, slightly surprised. "For what?" "For telling the truth." I walked away across the sand without looking back. I didn't know how long Mark stayed. Didn't need to. I'd heard what I needed, and it changed everything. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark, listening to the waves and a gecko's soft chirps. I thought of my mom's eyes every time I asked about the trip, and she said, "We'll let you know later." I remembered how Sarah dodged when I asked directly, "Am I definitely going?" Neither lied. But the truth they didn't say was worse than any lie. I also remembered old family dinners when I tried to join the conversation, but my words were drowned out by Sarah's voice. I recalled getting a scholarship for a design course in New York, and my mom only saying Sarah's busy with wedding plans. You should help her more. I was never chosen. I was only adjusted to fit. The next morning I didn't get up early like usual. I let myself lie still staring at the ceiling in the dim morning light. Part of me wanted to leave Hawaii, leave this story. But another part, the part done running, said I needed to stay. Not to confront, but to keep living as myself. Not for them, but for me. I opened the window. The sea breeze poured in scented with salt plumeria and something sweet like comfort. I made coffee, sat on the porch, looked at the sea. I thought of Mark. How he chose to say what the family kept hidden. Maybe he didn't mean to defend me or betray anyone. He just couldn't stay silent anymore. And sometimes one person speaking the truth is enough for another to see everything clearly. I sipped my coffee, set the mug down. My phone buzzed. A new message. From my mom. Just one line, I want to talk to you. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't know what she'd say. Didn't know if this was genuine or just a reflex. But I knew I wouldn't reply, not yet. I don't know the exact moment in life when you realize you've let go of part of the past. Not because you forget or fully forgive, but because you understand you no longer want to carry it. It was a very specific feeling on a Thursday morning. I was making coffee sunlight streaming into the kitchen through frosted glass. On the table, my laptop was open. I was about to transfer money to an old client, a small transaction. While opening the payment app, I saw my mom's name in the blocked list. I looked at the unblock button like it was an open-ended question, and I pressed it. No fireworks, no dramatic music, just a light tap, an invisible action. But afterward, I stood still, coffee mug in hand, and realized I'd just opened a door I'd kept locked for so long. Not because my mom had changed, not because I'd forgotten what happened, but because I understood I didn't want pain to define our relationship anymore. I just didn't need it to be the center anymore. Since the hospital visit, my mom hasn't texted again. No check-ins, no explanations, no attempts to pull me back. But there was a difference. She no longer used silence to ignore a problem. She let the space between us exist honestly, and I for the first time didn't feel the need to fill it. A few weeks later, Sarah sent a message. Found an old photo in storage today. Check it out. It was a picture of our family on La Jolla Beach. I was about 8, wearing a purple t-shirt, squinting and smiling in the sun. Sarah stood beside me, arm around my shoulder. My mom was fixing my dad's hair, and my dad, always the quiet one, had the brightest smile in the photo. I looked at it for a while. Not because I missed it, but because I saw clearly for the first time there was a time I didn't need to be accepted, because I hadn't yet learned to doubt my worth. I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. Cassie and Joy still text every week, not regularly, but always at the right moment. They're two people who know nothing of my past, untouched by my childhood's collisions, yet they witnessed the moment I found myself again. We call it unconditional contact. No expectations, no analysis, just presence. Once Joy sent a photo of a stray cat she's caring for and wrote, "It's like you looks gentle, but everyone knows not to touch unless invited." I laughed. A real laugh, not bitter. Time passed. I worked more, not to forget anything, but because work returned to its rightful place, part of a balanced life, not an escape. I tidied the house, bought more plants, changed the curtains. Small actions, but each time I felt I was reclaiming a bit more ownership of my life, no longer living by someone else's script. One afternoon while writing, I thought of the Hawaii trip. Not the drama or the confrontation. I remembered that first morning lying by the pool, holding a juice, no one calling my name, no one asking anything. Just the breeze and waves and my heart empty in a pleasant way. I didn't gloat about getting back at my family. I didn't feel guilty for going my own way. I just felt right. It wasn't retaliation. It was a turning point of freedom. My mom sent one more text after I unblocked her. "I don't know if you'll read this, but I want to say I'm still learning." That was it. No exclamation mark. No attempt to prove anything. I didn't reply, but this time I didn't block her again. I let the message sit. Like a small stone placed neatly in a stream, not stopping it, not redirecting it, but leaving ripples. I don't expect a family reunion dinner tomorrow. I don't expect my mom to call and say what I once craved. I don't expect Sarah to understand. Maybe they never will. But I no longer live to be understood. I live to be myself clearly, fully, without needing to prove it. My story isn't just about a canceled vacation, or a family broken in silence. It's about someone learning to define their own worth, no longer relying on approval from those once closest. I don't write to condemn, nor tell it to be pitied. I tell it to remind sometimes the most humane thing we can do for ourselves is step out of the molds that have hurt us too long. Forgiveness isn't always a happy ending, but conscious silence and choosing to love yourself fully can also be a reconciliation. With the past. With yourself. If you see yourself in this story, even apart, thank you for listening to the end. Please follow the channel for more stories about family healing and the journey of being human. I believe in quiet empathy we'll see each other and ourselves.